So what I understood from this, Sabri, I mean, just me reading some books in the last few months, and something we tried in the previous startup as well. I mean, in a way, I
Yeah.
imagine what you did as creating a subcategory of sorts, right? Within
Correct.
within ed tech as well, right? Because I mean, you saw
Yeah.
this, but nobody was addressing this
Yeah.
as to how you connect career with curriculum, sort of thing, and
Correct.
that turned out to be a great decision, right?
Correct.
So the next thing I was going to ask you is, I mean, obviously, all that is in the past.
Mm-hmm.
In hindsight, you already said you were glad you went through those painful few months, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, as someone who's been through that, now you're on the other side of the table. Let's say
Mm-hmm.
there's somebody who like, oh, I mean, I think I want to be an entrepreneur. I mean, what are those top two, three things that you tell people who want to be entrepreneurs?
The number one thing I tell people is like, what problem do you want to solve? A lot of times people always hear the success stories of entrepreneurship, but you have more failures than successes. And in order to sort of weather the ups and downs of a startup, you really have to believe in the problem that you're solving. I never ask anyone, what product are you building? I'm always asking, like, what problems are you solving, right? And then why do you care about this problem, right? I mean, not everybody is going to find a problem from their own lived experience, but it could be your friends, it could be something you saw in your community, it could, there's a reason why you think this, I am gonna, take all the risks and put my life on hold to go build this thing, and it's not going to be easy. There has to be a real reason why you believe this is the problem you want to solve.
Yeah.
You know, so that is my number one thing. Like, who are you? Why do you care about this problem? What problem are you solving? Right? And yeah, that's probably the number one thing. And then one thing I'm learning as an investor now, and this is still, I'm still learning and gathering information, um, is like that founder market fit, right? Like founder profile fit. I mean, it's not just founder market fit. Like, I don't know how to say it. It's some people, like there's so many ups and downs in building a company. Like, it's kind of like a dating period. When a founder is pitching to you, all you hear is, rainbows and roses, right? Like, it's this perfect pitch, like there's a hockey stick growth, and then they're going to raise this much money and they're going to build this. And everybody, that's what you aspire to do. But the reality is there's so many pitfalls along the way.
Yeah.
You see clearly founders who are willing to weather that storm and keep your chin up and pivot and build and try again. And sometimes even when you try all those things, you fail. That there's nobody that can do anything about it.
Yeah.
But then you also see founders that completely fall apart, and it's very difficult as an early stage investor to tell what kind of a founder you are. When there's not much data, there's hardly any product. I only met you last week, so for early stage investors, it's super tough because as the company grows, you have more data. You can really rely on the data and the product and the customers and stuff. But when you're so early, you're really investing in the founders. And now what we do is we make sure we are going and meeting the founders in person. We're spending some time with them. We're talking to people who they've worked with in the past. And there's no clear science for how to make sure this founder profile is right.
Yeah.
But it's a trial and error,
Yeah. That's great, Sabri. I mean, just to let you know, you're the second one on the show who's actually talked about the problem being the focus, right? Not the solution. One of the guests on our previous show told us about fall in love with the problem, not the solution.
Yeah.
That is
Yeah.
exactly what you're saying as well. And I think if I
Yeah.
understand the second point, right, I mean, it's in a way saying, somebody who's been in investment banking all their lives, if they want to do a SaaS startup on the cloud where they probably have very little experience, but they heard something on the train and they want to start something. I mean, that's more the founder market fit that you're.
That's a founder market fit, yeah.
So,
And that's the founder market fit, and then the founder profile, right? Like, are you able to run lean for as long as it
Yeah.
takes, right? And that's where I was telling you, like all founders come in all shapes and sizes at all stages in life. Like if you're a single earning member in your family with two kids, are you actually able to do this without taking a full salary? Do you have sort of that financial freedom to do that? You have to sometimes, a lot of times I think as entrepreneurs, and that's part of why entrepreneurs are entrepreneurs, is you want to be sort of, what's the word, like you want to be optimistic about everything,
Yeah.
but then you have to draw that fine line between optimism and practicality, like where are you in your life? Are you able to take this risk? You don't need to overanalyze, but you at least need to have like a 2 year of a safety cushion,
Yeah.
to be able to go and do this, right? But a lot of times I feel like people sort of completely miss that. Especially if I don't know if you remember in all our business plan pitches, like people were like, I'm going to pitch and raise money and build a product and pay myself and still continue the same lifestyle. It doesn't work that way, right? Especially for first time entrepreneurs.
Yeah.
Maybe a proven entrepreneur can go and raise money with an idea, but most entrepreneurs cannot.
Yeah.
So you really need to be practical and plan for that a bit, before you sort of pull the plug, right? So,
Yeah, great advice, Sabri. So, one of the questions I think about, when I look at you being a successful entrepreneur, as well as now you're on the other side, people talk about not many female entrepreneurs out there, right? Or even female
mhm.
investors. I mean, the people who want. So, I mean, you've obviously been through it. You spoke about, how much support you got from the family. And I'm sure you get asked this question quite a bit. I mean, for people who are out there, I mean, being a girl dad myself, I mean, I keep telling my daughter, saying, I mean, there's nothing like, things that you can't do. That's a, man's job versus a woman's job sort of thing.
Yeah, yeah,
So,
yeah.
any 2 cents of advice, Sabri, or a message from you, being what you've been through your journey?
No, absolutely. That's a great question, because I think it's very different now compared to when, 10 years back when I started the company, right? I remember vividly, like when I started the company with my friend, we clearly had our skill sets, right? Like I was going to be the CEO and co-founder, which means I need to be out there. I'm sort of the face of the company. My co-founder was the CTO, and that's he was great at building the product, but we have such a good complementary skill sets. So most of the fundraise, I used to just go by myself. And I remember so vividly this conversation. This was a high profile person who's an author. The book is very well known. I met her in Boston and I went through my pitch, and she basically said, "Do you have a co-founder?" I said, "Yes." "Is he a male?" And I said, "Yes." She said, "You need to bring your co-founder with you to these pitches." And I was like, "Why?" She said, "Obviously, you're super passionate about the problem you're solving. It's very clear you understand this market very well. But don't shoot the messenger," because she said, "I did the study in Harvard with, taking a sample size of putting the same pitch in the hands of a woman founder and a male founder, and the woman founder had 60% less chance of raising funding, and the most bias, I was shocked, the most bias came from other women
Yeah.
investors."
Mm.
So which was shocking to me. But so she said, "Don't shoot the messenger. I'm just telling you what the data's telling me, and you need to take your co-founder so you have a better chance of, raising the funding." I I said, "This is actually offensive to both of us, right? Like he's not a prop and I'm not an idiot." So so I was like, I don't want such investors at the table. I want investors who believe that I can actually run this company and be successful. And I was fortunate enough to find those investors. Like every single person who invested in the company really believed in my story, in my lived experience, in our combined capability to actually deliver on what we set out to do. And so the number one, I mean, it's changed a bit today. There are a number of, it's still, the numbers are lower, but I'm part of like many of these women GP groups, so there's more and more women investors. There's more and more women founders also, especially, I think maybe because I'm in education technology and there's a lot more women founders in ed tech. But there is always a bias. And to be fortunate, what I say is don't lead with that. Don't go into the work thinking, oh, there's bias, this whole world is against me. I never actually take that approach. I'm like, if I find the right problem and I prove that I can actually, build a product, take it to market, show revenue traction, show the traction, build a good team, build good culture, that work speaks for itself. It doesn't matter whether I'm a male or a female.
Yeah.
I mean, so I feel like there's if you walk around with a chip on your shoulder saying I'm woman, I'm being discriminated against, it's not like the right approach to life. You always assume, okay, I do my work and I can, yeah, maybe I have to prove myself a little bit more. That's totally fine.
Yeah.
But one thing I would say, what I have learned that works in our favor as women is now actually there is data showing that women run companies are much more capital efficient, So, and then the other thing I feel is, as a woman, I never really, hid the fact that, oh, I'm a mom, I have to go early to pick up my kids or this or that. I was always like, I need to stop at 3 o'clock, go pick up my kids. When I started my company, both my kids were in elementary school. And so being sort of vulnerable and having empathy for your co-workers really helps you build a very special culture.
Yeah.
You become more relatable to people. This is not a world we live in where the leaders are the ones that sit, above in their thrones and everybody minions are going around. To build a strong culture, to build a strong culture, you need to be relatable. You need to be, people in my team saw me as a mom, we had a lot, they were like, okay, work life balance is important, she needs to do this. And then the culture was, okay, I need to go pick up my kid at 3 o'clock.
Yeah.
And we never really judged anyone harshly. And as a woman, you kind of bring that empathy and vulnerability to your team. You build a very special culture. And I say, don't hold back on being vulnerable and being who you are just because the society or somebody told you have to be tough and you have to behave like a man.
Yeah, just being genuine and being yourself is super important. I mean, that way people see who you are and not the artificial, co-founder who is making things weird for the team.
Correct. And I think definitely the world has come a long way, and there is a lot more, there's a lot more understanding and appreciation even for people who come and be vulnerable and to have the empathy. You're not being judged harshly because you're not being harsh. You're not that kind of a person, so.
Great. So let's shift gears a little bit, Sabri. We spoke about your entrepreneurial journey so long. Now you're an investor with JFF. It is Jobs for the Future Ventures. Did I say that right? Or?
Yeah. Jobs for the Future is a large national nonprofit in the education to workforce space. It's a huge ecosystem. It's a 40-year-old nonprofit that's doing amazing work across the learn to earn ecosystem. And we have an opportunity to build a venture fund on top of this amazing ecosystem.
Great. And so coming from where you started off, especially your entrepreneurship journey, right? I mean, you had your pitfalls, you shook it off, you built a successful business. And being on the other side, and when you speak to entrepreneurs or when you put a fund together, I mean, what are some of your core principles that you look for from I mean, you can talk on both sides, right? I mean, you obviously need to build a fund talking to investors, and then you need to look at what sort of portfolio do you want to build, right? I mean, I'm assuming you take a lot of cues from what you learned as an entrepreneur. Things, let's say, I mean, you spoke about whom you don't want to invest in your company, right? I mean, for example, obviously those sort of learnings will be etched in your memory saying, oh, as
Yeah.
somebody, the investor, I don't want to be that person, right?
Yeah.
So, have you told yourself certain investing principles that you would want to believe in?
No, 100%. I always say that I've been an entrepreneur for more than a decade and an investor for 10% of that time. So I am always still more of a founder. So I'm learning to kind of be the investor that founders want to work with, right? It's easier for me to do that because I've been in their shoes. So automatically, I think there is some street cred when I talk to founders. They're like, okay, you get it, you know? So, um, so the, so the number one thing that, both me and my partner, the kind of team that we're building is, again, with the same thing, we want to have more empathy for the founders, right? So small things that we're trying to emphasize that I bring from my founder days is, if you're evaluating a company and if it's a no, let's get to a quick no. Let's not keep the founder sort of, hanging in there, because it's a tough job as a founder. Every fundraising is it's a distraction. It's necessary, but it's a distraction, but it's sort of, depletes you. And so you don't want to add to that. Like, of course, we are busy, we have a lot of things going on, but that's like small things like that, right? And then we're also like very particular, like, we don't want to be just a check, right? Every investor tries to be offer value, but we have a special situation now where, we have access to a large ecosystem. And so we are building our team so that post investment we are offering real value to our founders, so especially because we are writing, first checks into pre-seed and seed stages, and many times these founders are first time founders who are trying to balance impact and growth and scale. So we want to be sort of true partners, right? We don't want to just be lip service to the fact that, we can be helpful.
Yeah.
So to that extent, we've actually set up our team and hired people in order to make sure that's not left to chance. So yeah, and then just being very thoughtful. I mean, we are a very thesis driven fund, right? Like, we are not just randomly investing in any and every company. Our thesis is investing in the economic mobility of low wage workers, which means there's like, 120 plus million people in the US that make less than $45,000 a year. And that is always a first lens. Um, so whether it's education technology, workforce technology, or technology that employers need to support this population, or what do they need outside of work to thrive at work, like childcare, transportation, access to, credit. So we're investing in a range of companies across industry sectors, but we have a very defined thesis of our target beneficiaries. So that kind of helps us sort of narrow down things very quickly, right? But still, it's one thing I'm learning as an investor is, I always joke about it saying, as an entrepreneur, I thought, wow, like, look at these investors, they just sit around and write checks all day long, like. But we also have to raise money. We also, our product is our thesis, and what, our portfolio. We also have to do all those things. But the thing is, like, you can't keep building the team, right? Most venture teams are like super small.
Yeah.
But we're managing an existing fund. We are raising a new fund. We are also constantly listening to pitches and sourcing and diligence and investing. So I'm still trying to operate in this world and be efficient. Is you're wearing a lot of hats and changing those hats every hour.
Yeah.
And that's a skill I'm still trying to acquire, right?
I'm sure you'd be great at that too,
I don't know. The jury is still out. We'll see.
I love the fact that you call yourself an impact investor. I'll say that
Yeah.
why, because I mean, I come across a lot of meetups in the Bay Area where you go for all these VCs about raising funds and all that. 95% of them are just worried about how much money they can make, right? And so we cover
Yeah.
all sorts of stages, all sorts of industries. I mean, they don't say, here's my purpose of the fund, right? I mean,
Mhm.
here's what I
Mhm.
want to
Mhm.
really make a difference in, which
Yeah.
is not very prevalent in a lot of funds, and
Mhm.
it is hardy to see that you're looking at it through a very specific lens,
Yeah.
and where it is much needed, right? Where you can make a
Yeah.
difference, and you're encouraging founders to make a difference in that world.
Yeah.
So that is
Yeah.
kudos to you.
No, thank you. And it's not easy. I think we're all glutton for punishment. We are out to prove that you can have impact at the forefront and still build a successful company that's financially, successful. So the message that we want to communicate is impact is not a risk.
Yeah,
In fact, impact is an enabler. And impact, building impactful companies is what keeps founders motivated to continue to weather the storms. So,
perfect. So, Sabri, thanks so much for your time. I've already taken enough of your time, but beautiful insights right from where you started off your career to where you are right now. I'm sure people would love to hear more of you talking. I'm sure I can get you on at any time later on. But for now,
yeah.
thanks so much for jumping on, Sabri, and sharing your story and all your beautiful advice. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Anthony, for the opportunity. I appreciate it.